Well, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Lot Talk, episode 4. My name's Chris Keene. I'm one of the co-hosts here. I'm the Senior Vice President of Dealer Relations for Lotpop. And joining me, as always, my awesome co-host, Peepaw himself, Mr. John Anderson, our Executive Vice President and Chief Experience Officer, and Director of Training and Performance Engineering, Mr. Ronaldo Leonard. Gentlemen, good morning. John, I got to ask you a question. Did you get your warm milk? You got your Snuggie on. I know wintertime's coming. I want to make sure Peepaw's nice and comfortable because we got a lot to cover today.
What's up? What's up? Yeah, I did. Look here. I got it, and I got a little portable heater underneath the desk on my feet, so I'm nice and comfortable. So nothing to worry about. You guys don't worry about me. The elder of the group. So you're so disrespectful of the elders in the room. So it's good to see y'all today, though, and your bright and shiny faces. And Chris, it's nice to see that one of our listeners or watchers had a request that you'd wear your cowboy hat, and you did that today. So that's nice of you, man. I like you. I like you. Red Dirt Hillbilly, baby. I like you.
Well, that's what we're here for. We're here to appease the listeners. We are here to appease the listeners. We are here to appease the watchers. But more importantly, as always, we're going to work the facts today. We're going to share audio-wise, video-wise. We're going to share so many different things that's going to help our automotive industry brothers and sisters out there take all the suck out of what it is that we do. We're going to work the facts. We're going to help them keep it simple. So, Ronaldo, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir. Shoot.
The topic of today, set it and forget it. We are going to unpack that crock pot theory in automotive. Now, you gave us, when we were talking earlier this week, I think you're the one who brought it up. Give our listeners, give our viewers a little history around the crock pot.
Well, I don't know about the crock pot, and where that originated, but down in Texas, when we do that barbecue, we go low and slow. And so it takes a little time for things to marinate in those juices and that flavor to come out and just pop you in the mouth.
Preach, baby, preach.
Well, yeah, man, there ain't nothing like it. But when we were talking about what we were going to discuss this week, and everything centered around how we have this set it and forget it mentality, the thing that came to my mind was I don't know if you guys remember Ron Popeil. He was the creator of the infomercial, and he would come up with he had a couple of gadgets that you used in the kitchen, and his tagline was, "All you have to do is set it and forget it." And a lot of people have taken that mentality when it comes to managing the dealership, both on the inventory side and especially on the lead side. And when every day we're having conversations about how to help dealers vertically integrate both their lead management and their inventory management processes, set it and forget it is the last thing you want to do. And so, but that's one of the things that guys are so entrenched in. I mean, it's become part of their culture, and it's a big obstacle to overcome in order to get them to change that paradigm. So that was the motivation behind it and the basis behind it. But then, I mean, I can go out and look out my back door and see a Traeger smoker, and that's kind of the same mentality. So I'm guilty as charged. I like to set it and forget it as well. But I'm still doing good.
Before, John, we were talking about it earlier this week too, when we were talking about the crock pot, the whole set it, forget it piece of it. Do you remember how fun it used to be to almost be like a detective? And appraisals back in the day took a whole lot longer. And the only reason why they took a lot longer because we got to spend time digging through the vehicle, trying to figure out exactly where those customers been shopping. Because remember, it never failed. You look down in between the seats, and there was that old Auto Trader magazine, or there was that old newspaper, and they had all the vehicles circled that they were going to look at. And then you start looking back at the dealership going, oh, man, they're looking at one of those kind of vehicles. What price are they looking at? So we got to do all the detective work. Listen, I'm almost ashamed to tell y'all this, but there's been many times on an appraisal, I look over and I see what they've been looking at in the newspaper. Driving down the road, I'll stop by a gas station to throw that newspaper away so they forget what dealerships they need to go to or what pricing they even looked at. You ever do that, John?
You know what? I don't know if this is the right platform for me to share some of the things I did. I get myself in trouble, but we were talking about it earlier this week. I remember many times, I hate to admit it, but I'd pop open the glove box and look in that glove box to see if I could find anything about the vehicle that would help me on the appraisal. So, I listen. What's the old saying? All's fair in love and war, right? So yeah. We used to actually, believe it or not, and I don't know if it's done that much anymore, but we used to actually get out and drive that car off the lot, right? And drive it for a mile or two. I think a lot of times now it's drive it around the lot, right? Instead of off the lot. But yeah, you'd be amazed if you take a little time with that car, what you could find out about it just by looking around in the car, right? That car will tell you, like you said last week, you cut me open, Chris, and you see the rings on me and the age, right? The same thing on that car. That car will tell you an amazing story if you let it, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I would tell you that was a lot of fun though, and on that same topic of the title of today's episode, wonderful episode 4 here. We sit there, we talk about set it, forget it, and John, you bring up a great point. I mean, we would sit there and in today's time, you'd ask a salesperson, hey, is the air blow codes, the radio work, did you roll the windows down? Hear any funny ticks in it? And managers, they don't take the Velcro off their ass and get out there and go shake the car down for more reasons than just making sure it's mechanically sound, making sure everything's working, checking paint lines on it, doing all the things that we would historically do to make sure the vehicle's right. But then more importantly, like you just said, you just sit inside that car and you just look around, it'll speak to you and it'll start telling you some things if you would just get out and go drive it. But also I would sit there and say, and some of you guys might have did this. I would love to hear if salespeople are doing this today. So if you are, and you're watching this on YouTube, comment below, because I'd like to hear if you're doing it. But one of the things that we implemented, back in the day, John and Ronaldo, was we actually had the salesperson ask the customer to take them on a test drive in the vehicle that they were trading. That spoke so many volumes. John, did y'all ever do that? I mean, it was,
it's
long time ago.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, Chris, because that was something I was gonna mention when you were done, is that very thing, right? I'm curious to know how many people nowadays, salespeople, right, either do that, encourage the customer to go on a test drive with them, or if nothing else, walk them out and walk around that car with them, and sit inside that car as they're doing that appraisal, right? It's amazing. You don't really have to. I used to tell my salespeople all the time, you don't really have to say anything to a customer, right? If that car has, let's say a car has a scratch on a fender, right? As you're walking around that car, all you have to do is put your finger or your hand by that scratch and just kind of rub on it. And typically that customer, there's a story behind that, right? So that customer will offer that story up, right? Oh yeah, I had my son's bike hanging in the garage, and I knocked it off the wall, and it hit the fender and put a scratch on it, right? So you just basically, by you just walking around and acknowledging what you're seeing on that car or what you see on the inside, and you have that customer with you, that customer will offer up the story behind that, and then you can note all that down, right, for the final appraisal. So, that's I think, and I hope people do comment. I'd be curious to hear myself, because I think that's kind of a lost art these days, as a part of that set it and forget it, right? We just take the information from the customer and then hand it into the appraiser, and the appraiser goes out and appraises the car. I'm curious to see how much interaction there is these days.
The old silent walk around, man. I used to love that.
Yep.
Because
exactly,
as you said, like you mentioned, you just walk around and touch. You don't have to say a word.
Nope.
You don't have to touch the scratch. You could be in the vicinity and touch it. And then here comes a 15-minute story about that whiskey bin. Yeah, I loved it. And back then we never really had huge conversations or a huge battle over that appraised value, because every time you did that and the customer kind of let you know exactly what was behind the damage on that vehicle, they're mentally diminishing what they thought they were going to get for it when they came in. But then it also kind of validates the fact that, when we're appraising this vehicle, it's a commodity, and it's an investment from the dealership. But what you believe it's worth and what it's actually worth, because of all of the work we're going to have to put into it to get it frontline ready, there's two different things, but there's great reason why. And so, I would be surprised if you, I think I got my game plan for the afternoon. I might have to just go to the dealership and pretend to trade in a vehicle just to see if they're still doing it. But I would venture to guess they're just taking down the information, plugging the numbers in, and putting a number on it.
Hey, you guys think they're training on that these days? Because here's my thing, and we've talked about this before, right? How many folks have come into the automotive industry, right, business, since 2008, 2009, right? The last time we had a wild market swing, and the housing crisis that happened back then, and then you had cash for clunkers, and then obviously people were using the internet more, so a lot of dealerships switched an emphasis to not necessarily needing those auto titans on their floor anymore. They get good service people, right? But I'm just curious, you think the management staff trains on that type of walk around anymore to get the salespeople to do that? Because if you come into business since 2010, 2011, unless somebody trains you on that, you're not gonna know that. You haven't had to, right? The used car business has been pretty good from that point, so you really didn't have to do a lot of those things that I know the last couple of weeks we referred to the past quite a bit, right? But honestly, a lot of that art that made us successful has been lost in the translation forward now, where we're bringing a lot of younger folks are entering into our industry, and I just don't think it's getting trained that much anymore.
Yeah, but John, I would sit there and tell you, you're right, it's not, but it again leads back to the topic of what we're talking about today of set it and forget it, and that old crock pot mentality. Part of the reason why we're not seeing that training of the old school is because some of our managers today, some of our dealer principals today, have gotten wrapped up in all this technology and this software and this ease of use, and arguably some of the things that for our franchise dealers that the OEMs are forcing dealers to do, or some of these things that the federal governments and state governments with compliance and things of that nature are forcing our dealers to do. It's almost like they're paralyzed by so much of this additional software and tools and things of that nature out there. Then you have all kinds of different vendors, if you will, attacking the dealer going, hey, I've got the latest and greatest widget. I've got the best tool. I've got this, I've got that. Where do you have time to sit down and train your people on those basic fundamentals? I firmly believe, and it's because here at Lotpop, we see it day in and day out, the ability to take that old retro way of doing business, marrying it with the tools that you have today to make the job more seamless, to make the job easier, and to make it where you can actually meet the customer where they're at. So John and Ronaldo, I would tell you now, in defense of the dealers today, it's almost like, where do we start training on this? How do we start training on it? Because we do have all these tools that are supposed to make our job easier, that are supposed to be like a set it and forget it, but it's really not. Because as we talked about in episode 1, where so many consumers are using digital pieces online, they're using all the things available to them, but they still want to come into the dealership and have that human interaction. I think that if we were to give any advice on today's call, it would be gather up some of the old timers like John, look at the things that worked extremely well in the past. How does that marry with the tools that we are provided today? And can we take and make our jobs more efficient by using those two pieces together? Because as we looked at the days to retail turn, I mean, we're in a small window. The days to retail turn is down by 9 days, and the shopper index is increasing. So we have a small window of time to get it right. I don't know. That's kind of my opinion on it. Ronaldo, what's yours?
Well, and I was just thinking that the things that we have began to focus on or started to focus on with sales consultants has been, let's go get all the information on that trade, enter it in the CRM, get your 10 photos inside so that we can appraise it. And that's replaced what we were speaking about earlier, doing the silent walk around, taking the customer on a test drive of the appraisal before you turn it over to the manager. Those things can be easily integrated because you're spending time on that process already. And it's not going to extend that process, too much further. The return on that investment in time far exceeds exactly why we're not doing it. But I think you hit the nail on the head. So many other things, so many other plates spinning for managers who, and I don't know about you guys, but when I was brought up in the business, those were the guys that I learned from and took the time to walk me step by step through the process and would hold me accountable. If my sales manager saw me out visiting with a customer, he knows I'm walking around the vehicle and he knows I'm supposed to be doing the silent walk around. But if he saw me talking to the customer, it was a half deal split right out the gate. And I fortunately was the only one that ever happened to, but it was one of those things that, that accountability, it kind of instilled that process. I mean, that I was going to have to do every day, every time without fail, no exceptions. Or I knew there were going to be consequences. And the biggest consequence to it is just, lost gross on the deal. If you don't do the deal right, you're shortcutting yourself. And so to answer your question, I did take the long way around the barn. But to answer your question, I think that we've been driven by all of the technology that we have and trying to do things more efficiently, but stepping away from the things that actually created, gross profit and deals and taking shortcuts. If we just took a couple of those things, and you just mentioned it a minute ago, if we just implemented a couple of those things inside of the process, the return would far outweigh the expense of the time that's going to take to train it and to hold it accountable.
Hey guys, think about this. If you guys can remember, and I'm trying to think how long, but think about how long ago it was that OEMs and a couple of new players, back then they were new players, come in and tried to remove the salesperson out of the equation, right? That they wasn't that what initially what Ford Direct was all about, to do directly, the consumer do direct business with the manufacturer, right? And have any of those been successful over time?
You saw,
Wasn't it?
yeah.
Wasn't it CarMax? I could be wrong on this. Wasn't it CarMax that originally come out with this kiosk where you go in and or am I thinking of somebody different? Right, where you went in and did business with a kiosk, right?
Mhm.
And then they would just basically, you put in what you wanted to drive, and they would and are do they have salespeople now? I listen. I think the common thread through all this is people want to do business with people. You're never going to be able to replace. You're never going to be able to replace that. In my opinion, that person. They want that. They want that personal interaction, right? Everybody wants to brag about, hey, you need an attorney, go see my attorney. You need a dentist, go see my dentist, right? You need a good car person, go see this person, right? So I think that personal interaction is what everybody wants, and I think sometimes that's where, Chris, to your point, we have all this technology, and that technology tends to pull us away from that common thread, right? I think everything that we do within the dealership structure, the variable, even the fixed operations, right? Everything we do, yes, the technology helps us tremendously, but we should look at it as a way that it's helping us to serve that personal interaction, right? To improve that personal interaction, and not think of it from a set it and forget it. And just, again, how many times do we see through our software when we're working with dealers, especially new dealers that we bring on, that customers haven't been reached out to in 20 or 30 or 40 days, right?
Mm.
And they're looking for that personal interaction, right? They're looking for they're trusting us as the professional, right? They're trusting us as the professional that's going to give them the reasons why they're making a good decision. Is this a good decision for me to purchase this vehicle that I raised my hand and said, hey, I'm interested in this vehicle on your lot, right? And they're looking for us to give them that reasoning, right? Why should I buy this vehicle, right? And when we ignore that personal interaction, they're going to go find it somewhere else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, and, in the industry's defense, when you call repeatedly to reach out to a prospect and they'd rather receive a text, it's confusing,
Get it.
But
Yeah, you're right.
when you're going through that whole process, we always preach that you have to meet the customer where they're at, but you also have to encourage them to meet you where you can kind of figure out exactly, all right, they're telling me that they want a text, but what everybody really wants is to have a nice conversation that's value added with the information, or with the with the details and information that customers are doing on their own. But they want to hear from a trusted advisor who's going to validate what they've come up with, and maybe even disprove some fallacies they may be out there. Because let's just face it, not everybody is as meticulous with their vehicle descriptions and all of the other data surrounding competitive vehicles and all that good stuff. But I think that we have to just take a little bit more time. You got to slow down to speed up, in order to dial in specifically how we can get skills to salespeople who are the face of the dealership in every one of those interactions, but how we can train them to be those, detectives that we need, so that they can understand what the customers tell them, or the prospect is telling them, how and what they want to buy, and when they want the process to move forward. So it's great.
Hey, Ronaldo, you think based on what you said about sticking up for the industry. And I don't disagree with you, right? A lot of customers don't want to have initial conversations, right? They want text and stuff like that. But let me ask you a question. Do you think that we could further that along if in the initial stages as a salesperson, in the initial stages, we gave them we gave them tremendous value, right? In other words, instead of just responding and saying, "Hey, I want to hear back from you," we talked about it last week, right? Chris, you alluded to that experience I had, right? Where we start sending them things that are going to pull them in, right? Because we're giving them value up front, right? Do you feel like if we did that initially, they would be more apt to be open to having a conversation with us, right? Because we're giving them stuff that they need to consider, and I think that leads to them wanting to have a conversation with us as opposed to just having a basic conversation and no, I don't want to talk to you. I just want you to text me.
Yeah, I mean, it all pretty much just gets down to high quality conversation or high quality questions. When you reply to an initial notification that this customer wants additional information, just following up. I'd be glad to give you that information. When would you like for me to have that available for you? And how would you like for me to communicate it to you? Would you like for me to email you? Or is text better? I understand that you're working through the day, but would you have 15 or 20 minutes that we could just get, and have a short conversation so that we can set the stage moving forward? Because I don't want to disappoint your expectations, but why don't we just take a couple minutes real quick and set those expectations so that I know exactly what I'm going to have to do to exceed those. And, it's just, it's a thought process that every interaction that we have with that prospect, our number one goal is to find out what the expectations are, set the expectations moving forward with what's possible and what's not possible, and then follow through with it.
Yeah, I think it's even more simply put, Ronaldo. I mean, you're driving right on it. And John, you're talking about it, meeting the customer where they're at. Customer sends a lead in, customer's a phone pop, whatever the case may be. And they're asking, does it have a panoramic sunroof? As a matter of fact, it has a panoramic sunroof. Here's a picture of it. Here's a quick video of it. And even simplified even more, going, what's next? Meaning, I've answered your question. You're obviously using the interweb to find a lot of information about it. You found my vehicle. I'm answering your questions about it. So, Mr. Customer, you tell us what's next. And I think we are still a little bit stuck in the fact that we are forgetting that the consumer has more tools now than they've ever had to be able to interact with you, to be able to research and find the information out. But if we could just get as simple as, yes, it does, it doesn't, here it is, here it isn't, answer their questions. And instead of saying, yes, it does have a sunroof, what time this afternoon can you be here? Yes, it does have a sunroof. What's next? What's next in your process, Mr. Customer, Miss Customer? What's next in your process? Where else can I serve you to help you make an educated buying decision? And I think those are some of the things that we're missing. And I'm going to give a shameless plug here with our company here at Lotpop and with Ronaldo Leonard and our training team. We have segments for all of our listeners out there that are our existing clients. We have segments in our training to help with those soft skill selling points in ways to help improve, whether it's you as a salesperson that's listening to this or watching this. We have an opportunity for you to go to lotpop.com, go to our training. You'll see a sales BDC. It is not limited to just training on our platform. We want to give you more resources and tools, help you sharpen your knife so you can learn how to meet these customers where they're at. So, guys, I talked about it just a minute ago, and Ronaldo and John, I've pulled it up on the screen here. We've seen the days to retail turn decrease by 9 days, shopper index increasing. These soft skills are the things I'm talking about that we need to capture that window of time. And John, you talked about this slide here extremely well with some of our dealer clients. Please share that. Share some more of that knowledge that you got from the Peepaw days and up until 2024. Share some of that with us.
Well, again, I think it's extremely important for as a dealer to understand, what's happening behind the scenes, and I think that's where that trending helps you, right? We always talk about, right, data helps us to make good decisions. It assists us, right? It's not everything, right? Listen, part of the understanding when you're managing a store is your experience, right? We do this all the time. We'll be on a call with one of our dealer partners, and we'll bring something up, and then they'll say, "Yeah, but," right? "Yeah, but these turn better at our store," right? And what do we typically say? That's how our partnership or our relationship works, like a hand in glove, right? Is that we're giving them a 20,000 or a macro view, and we do dig in deeper, but they also know what's happening on their lot. And I think, when you look at the trending here, and you look at wholesale percentage sold, shopper index, right, and the directional, right, of what's happening. Look at that wholesale sold, right, index, right, and look, that's important right now because, guys, how long have our dealer partners been asking us to help them with sourcing inventory, right? Because inventory is staying, auctions are expensive. And we had a major hurricane that went up the East Coast and took out a ton of vehicles, right? So when you look at that blue trend line, you're thinking, why isn't that thing dipping down? Well, there's a reason, right? And when you look at shopper index, right? And I think we've talked about this all week. Right after the election, you started to see, and I think we anticipated that, you started to see shoppers come into the market. We're seeing it through our dealers, right? We're seeing leads going up. We're seeing shoppers coming into the market. But is that necessarily turning into sales? And you can see that initially it did, that green trend line, 2 week sold percentage, you saw that trend up, but now it's dipping down again. And I think that's, this is where this helps us at, is to get an indication of what's happening out there. And then I transfer that to what's happening in my store, right? I can absorb all the market information I want to absorb. But does that necessarily mirror what's going on in my store? I jokingly say this. One of the things that used to happen in this store, couple stores that I was running, is if we had a couple bad days, right, where we weren't performing well, we didn't have many sales, invariably I'd have a manager walk into my office to try to console me, and they would say, "Hey, boss, I know we've had an off day, but I called the Ford store down the street, and they've been dead too." I wanted to throw a chair at them, right? Because I did not care what the store down the street was doing. I care what we're doing, right? So all this data is good to understand what's happening in the market, but I got to take that and apply it, because if I don't have activity going on in my store, and I'm going to circle back around to what we're talking about today, set it and forget it, right? If I don't have activity going on in my store, the phone's not ringing, I haven't seen anybody on my showroom floor in a couple of days, I've got to get in there and dig. I've got to start making some moves to change that trending, right? Once I start to see once the phone starts ringing, people are on my showroom floor, that snowball has a tendency to roll downhill pretty quickly. But I got to drive that, right? I can't just sit and wait and go, okay, it's going to happen eventually. No, I got to get in there. Is my team talking to our customers? What is the quality of the conversations? Have I changed any pricing in the last 7 to 14 days, right? I got to drive that activity. I can use this data to understand what's happening in the market, but I got to really understand what's happening at my store.
John, and you're all over it. And for our guys and gals that are just listening, what John was talking about in that wholesale sold and we have those major disasters over on the East Coast. I mean, what we're seeing here is a 58% in our wholesale sold. We're seeing the shopper index rising to 44% from where it was down at like 38%. We're seeing that 2-week sell rate, kind of maintained, but a little bit of a dip. And that's with our Lotpop customers, selling 43% of their overall inventory over the last 2 weeks. But the number that really just stands out to me is that retail days to turn going from a 57 down to a 48, going down to 48 days. But like John said, we're circling back to all of these different tools that we have, or these different crock pots, if you will. And if we just sit there and set it and forget it, and we don't actionably do the things that we need to do when we have that activity coming in, when those phones are ringing, when those leads are going up, then all you're going to be is a statistic of that Ford store down the street that they ain't selling no cars neither. But then you got guys 2 doors down that are got their processes set up. They're on top of the lead activity. They're meeting the customer where they're at. They're doing those things. And I think ultimately that's what we're really trying to cascade out there in this messaging today. The tools are great. The third-party companies you're working with, they're great. They bring a lot of value. They bring a lot of data. They bring a lot of insights. But no different than when John and Ronaldo and myself and many of you watching or listening today that are from the old school, when we would sit there and appraise that car, and we had to do our own data research by looking at what newspaper ad they had, or what rag magazine they had, or what was in the glove box, or the 4 cans of motor oil that were hidden underneath the seat. We had to do those things back in the day. But you fast forward to 2024, it's all automated for you. So use that information, but you physically have to act upon it. You physically have to open your mouth, because as my mentor told me, closed mouths don't get fed. And if you don't open your mouth and speak, if you don't ask those questions, if you don't investigate, if you don't sit there and do the things that you need to do to find out what's next, this data here on the screen, all you become is a statistic to the opposite side. You don't get to ride that wave where we see that shopper index going from a 38 to a 44. You don't get to ride that wave. You sitting on the sidelines. And Ronaldo, when you played ball for Texas Tech, if you didn't go out and practice, and if you didn't go out and perform in the practice time, Saturday, where was you at? Did you ride the pine?
Sitting right there next to Coach Dykes. That's how I became an ass back. Yeah. I say, Coach, can I go to the game? Like, Coach, can I get your game? Back. So and get your ass back. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's, not getting the ride that wave that you just talked about just means you can get swallowed up by it. If you've ever watched those guys that are surfing off the North Shore of Hawaii, if you don't catch that wave, you're in the barrel, just getting pounded off the bottom of the ocean. So,
100%.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. You have to be investigative, and everybody's searching for ways to be ahead of the curve. It's like Bobby Knight. Bobby Knight used to say that everybody wants to win, but not everybody wants to do what it takes to win. And it is a little hard work. A little hard work involved with taking all the technology, reading the tea leaves, so to speak, but looking at all the data points, connecting the dots for your situation, your market, your people there in the store, and then taking all this actionable intelligence and putting a plan in place and making sure that it's executed on. And it's just,
no, you're spot on. Go ahead, John.
No, you're good. I just to what Ronaldo was saying, the execution, right? listen, with all the technology we have today, how easy is it to get distracted or go down rabbit holes, right?
Mm-hmm.
We look at a piece of information, then we jump to another piece of information, and we jump to another piece of information, right? And before we know it, that first piece of information that we thought, man, I need to act on that. Now we've gone down so many rabbit holes, we forget to take action on that piece of information. And I think that's the important thing, right? Is understanding, and then understanding what we're seeing and where we need to take action in our store, to use Chris, what he says all the time, which I love, right? In our store with our people in our market, right? We have a tendency to be people that compare so much, right? And I get it with all social media and everything that we do nowadays, all the content that we gobble up throughout the days. It's hard not to compare, right? But really, when it comes down to it, it's what's happening at our store with our people in the market that we're trying to drive, and how can all these platforms, which are all valuable, inventory management tools, CRMs, everything that we use within the store, they're all valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how can we apply it to what's happening and not get paralysis by overanalysis, and thereby not act on this stuff, right? And that's where the problem comes in. That's where we have a tendency to set it and forget it, and we don't go back and look at things, right? When you're looking at your inventory management tool and you see, and I'll use vAuto because that's all I ever use, so I'm familiar with vAuto, is, vAuto shows you right there in the trending, if we show it in our software, but you can see a trend line if the market's dropping on that vehicle, right? And if I was priced 3 days ago at 98%, and now today, as a result of the market dropping, I'm at 101, I can't leave that alone. I have to acknowledge that, and I have to make a move, right? If I was willing to be at 98% 3 days ago, would I not be willing to be there today, especially if the market dropped on that vehicle? So I think that's the thing, is we can't allow all this stuff to cause that paralysis, and then not make moves or go back and check on things consistently so that we can stay proactive and ahead. Because I promise you this, one of your competitors is doing that. I can promise you that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And John, that's perfect segue here into wrapping up here today. But we get a ton of questions each and every single week, whether it's with Lotpop Inc., whether it's from this podcast. We get a ton of questions each and every week going, okay, great. You guys at Lotpop, y'all have helped us drive more activity. Great. We've got these leads coming in, but my gosh, what's our next step? I mean, should we use AI? Should we do this? Should we change our process in our CRM? What should we do next? Because we want to capture that wave. We want to have ourselves prepared for that wave coming in. We want to have our processes in place with this follow-up, through these winter times coming, when we all historically see the market soften up a little bit for us and retail sales come down just a smidgen. This is the perfect opportunity to share with all of our listeners, to share with all of our viewers, that next week we have a very special guest that is going to be joining us that has a lot of really great best practices. I can't wait to have that person. I'm not going to say if it's a him or a her, because I don't want to give it away, because a lot of people in the industry know this person, and this person is a beast when it comes to follow-up. I cannot wait for next week's episode when we have this person on, because they're going to help share a lot of insights and a lot of best practices to answer a lot of the questions that we've talked about over this last 4 weeks. We're going to put a nice bow on it, and that person's going to help us unpack a little bit more. But also, we are right around the corner from NADA. I mean, just in a few short months, we're going to be at NADA. Excuse me, guys. And I highly, highly, highly recommend our existing clients here at Lotpop. new clients that just want to have their processes broke down and really see where they can potentially take something back from NADA without costing them $1, come over to booth 1219 when we get down to New Orleans, and we will gladly sit down with you at no charge and look at your processes and help you take something back besides a pair of socks and a squishy football. We'll give you some stuff to take back to your store to make impact on your business. That being said, Ronaldo Leonard, our Director of Training and Performance Engineering, on behalf of John Anderson, our Chief Experience Officer, our Executive Vice President, our P-Paul, and myself, Chris Keene, Senior Vice President of Dealer Relations, we thank you guys for tuning in again, for listening again. We ask that you share this. We know there's some great content here. It may only be one piece of great content, but we ask that you share the podcast. We ask that you share the videos, and we ask that you send more questions in on the YouTube channel. Comment below anything that you want to comment on. We're happy to answer it. Just like our buddy Bobby Brister asked where my hat was. Old Bobby down there is Jackson, Mississippi. Here it is for you, brother. You guys want to see a different color hat next week? Let me know. I'll throw a different color on. Outside of that, John Anderson, any closing thoughts?
The only thing I'd say was Bobby in the league? No, that was Bubby, wasn't it? Bubby Brister.
That was Bubby.
Are they related?
He may be kinfolk.
Are they related?
He may be kinfolk. He could be.
Oh man.
Hey, no. The only thing I want to add is, listen. Hopefully, if you're watching and you're listening, you're finding value in this, because I will say this: the number one core value at Lotpop is dealers first, and the reason why Chris and Ronaldo and myself are doing this, and our great producer Brett Brandstetter behind the scenes there. The reason why we're doing this is really to try to give some insight on things that we see. We're working with over 300 dealers on a weekly basis and seeing a lot of trending, and we're really just trying to give some insight to help you guys that are in store and are taking action every day to try to help you to gain some further insight to help you get better. And hopefully that's what's coming across is listen, this industry, I think those other two guys on the screen shaking their head yes right now, I think they would agree this industry's been fantastic to all of us, and this is truly a way for us to give back, and that's what this thing was started for. So yeah, we just hopefully you find value in this thing.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love it.
The only thing I got to say heading out is, hey, just don't be complacent with the processes you have in place. Look at everything and look behind, pick up the big rocks to see what kind of squiggly things are crawling, underneath, because there's always opportunities to improve. It just comes first from diagnosing exactly what's going on, accepting there's a problem, looking for a solution, and then executing on what you've put in place. So thank you, fellas. Yeah, always enjoyed talking with you two gentlemen. And people, don't feel bad. I got a heater under my desk too. So I'm stuck.
That's good.
Maybe I'm on the line and I'm about to fall over to
P-Paul status.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Well, hey, gentlemen, thank you again. Another great episode here. Love it. I love having these conversations. Automotive community, thank you for listening again. Thank you for viewing. Share it, like it, comment on it, and we will see you next week with our special guest speaker. Thank you, guys.